Hey my good human, welcome back to the channel. I'm Luana Rose from luanarose.com, trauma and nervous system specialist. Today, as you can see, things are a bit different. I have my laptop here. We're going to delve into what the window of tolerance is, why it's important for you to know whether you struggle with mental health or maybe you help people with things like this. And this video is comprised of 3 parts. So part 1, we'll talk about the true self, our soul, our spirit, our divinity, and our survival self. Our survival self, which every human has, and how they are within each human being. The part 2, we are going to get on my laptop here, and I'm gonna take out my whiteboard and show you exactly what the window of tolerance is and how the autonomic nervous system, that rest and digest, parasympathetic, and the sympathetic, the one that arises to threat, work together kind of behind the scenes in our biology, no matter what we're doing any day of the week throughout our whole life. That's part 2. Part 3, we're going to talk about defensive accommodations. Some folks also like to call them coping mechanisms. I am a little bit technical in the wording there. Defensive accommodations is basically what Dr. Daniel Siegel developed, as he is the one that developed the concept, the theory of the window of tolerance. So we're going to talk about defensive accommodations. We all have them. Sometimes we need them more in our life. Other times we need them less as we build our regulation. Before we get into the video, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss videos. Make sure that notification button is turned on and leave a comment if you're excited about this video. It's a little bit more technical than other videos I've made in the past, a little bit longer. At the end of the day though, it's worth it to know this stuff if you are someone that's passionate about figuring out how to handle stress in a new way and understand yourself and your loved ones or the people that you help in a more in-depth way. Let's begin with differentiating between our true self and our survival self. So as you know, if you've been here on my channel for a while or worked with me personally, I am spiritual, and so I always like to weave that into the neurobiology of the things that we do. So first of all, our true self is our spirit, our soul, the special spark that each one of us has, no matter where you are in life, what age, what you're suffering with. Everyone has this intangible spark that helps them do things that are sometimes amazing and overcoming amazing adversities. So our true self is that spark, that divinity within each one of us. If you believe in past lives, those gifts that you have are part of that true self, your uniqueness. And then we have our survival self. So if you've been with me for a while, you know that I work mainly through the lens of developmental trauma, so anything that has impacted the development of the human that I'm working with, or the individual, the group that I'm working with. So our survival self and our true self are right here with conception. So 2 people get together, have a baby, right? In that utero phase at birth and all the way through 100 years old, 102, however long you want to live, right? We have that survival self and the true self. The survival self needs to come online in order to survive. So if everything goes right and little baby or little child human gets attuned caregivers, when baby cries, mom or dad are very much available and attuned and can respond, and their own system is quite regulated. So parent comes on in and soothes the baby. That's how each individual builds their own platform for nervous system and really whole body regulation. So if a human starts their life and they are getting that attunement, that call and respond and available caregiver, then the survival self will be very small, because there's not much need for the survival efforts from the physiology, but the true self really has space to reach and be broad and expansive. And those are the kids that we see that don't have a lot of fear. They can meet new people without being scared. They don't have any health or relational or behavioral issues per se, because they have received or been graced with parents that are emotionally available, so that true self can really grow, and the survival self stays pretty small. The thing is, with most people that I work with, they didn't have available caregivers. Or they didn't have available caregivers, or there were medical interventions that needed to happen early on in life, or other issues that came up that were traumatizing. So it could be parent gets sick, has to go to the hospital, child is left alone. It could be divorce, it could be adoption. These developmental things that as a society we call normal, but can actually have an impact on the development and the survival self. So if these issues happen, right, or child gets sick or breaks a leg very young, the survival self actually has to build itself up. So we have the survival self expanding, the true self has space, it's still there, but the survival self is very much there. Let's say if parents are emotionally unavailable, and maybe the child lives in a household where they see violence, they are sent to their room and called to isolate. If the parents don't like how they're behaving, these sort of punishments, spanking, hitting, will cause a survival self to really grow, because it's a normal protective response for physiology to produce and adapt, essentially. So just holding this in mind as we go through the window of tolerance. Survival self, true self. With our survival self, we will have a very small window of tolerance. And the true self, if we got everything we need, will actually have this nice, spacious window of tolerance. The window of tolerance is the space in which we can normally function in our everyday life when it comes to stress, when it comes to the autonomic nervous system's response to stress. So the true window of tolerance is the place where we can live, play, relate, all in a normal range of stress. Nothing's too much. Things are quite manageable. That is our true window of tolerance. Our faux window of tolerance is when we've gone overboard, when our system is overloaded, and essentially the relationship between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, is a bit off. So we develop this faux window of tolerance where we need substitutions in order to save face and feel okay. And this is where defensive accommodations come in, or coping mechanisms, which I will get into in a few minutes. So stick with me and let's continue. So here we have the window of tolerance, the space in which we can activate and deactivate as we move throughout the day, having natural stress responses to normal things like going to school, going to work, interacting with our loved ones, having relationships. This is the window, the space or range where we experience a normal amount of stress. So first things first, we need to know a few things before I show you how this works. Most importantly, this is basically a map that our autonomic nervous system takes us on without thinking every single day of our lives. The autonomic nervous system is one part of our nervous system that acts automatically, hence the word autonomic. So the automatic nervous system has two different parts, and it kind of runs behind the scene and is part of our brain system and our body system. That's the nervous system. So two parts of the autonomic nervous system we're going to be talking about today specifically is the sympathetic nervous system, which responds to threat and it moves us into action. The parasympathetic nervous system works with the sympathetic nervous system, and it comes in and meets the sympathetic nervous system and regulates us back down to rest and digest. For the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it short and simple, just speaking about those two parts of the autonomic nervous system. And here we have our true window of tolerance. We have our faux or fake window of tolerance. And this is what's supposed to happen. So what's supposed to happen is the sympathetic nervous system will arise to threat, a perceived threat, or simply if we go on a run, we're going to need that part of our system to mobilize into action, to go on a run, a healthy stress, right? So the sympathetic nervous system comes on up, and the parasympathetic is designed to come on in and meet it and down regulate the autonomic nervous system. And then it happens again. We go up, we go down. Maybe we have a period of not very much stress. We're kind of hanging out here. We're having that ventral vagal social connection. And then maybe something else more stressful happens and come down, we go up. So this is regulation. We're supposed to be regulating in our true window of tolerance throughout our day. It's a normal human response to life. Here's what happens when an individual has a highly dysregulated system due to past experiences, adversities, and trauma in the past. The sympathetic nervous system will come up into the faux window of tolerance, basically overwhelm, and it could stay up there for a while, and then it could drop right on down. So see, the peaks and valleys are essentially bigger than if we have a more regulation in our system, essentially. So if we're an individual that has traumatic experiences in our past, we're going to be familiar with these two states, hyperactivity or the deep dorsal shutdown. Have you ever heard of our stress response? Fight, flight, or freeze. This is how our biology responds to a real threat or a perceived threat with a fight, a flight, or a freeze. So hyperactivity is a fight or a flight response. It happens fast, and if an individual kind of lives in that state for sometimes a few weeks, months, the individual will feel like hyperactivity is a thing that they know well. So hyperactivity is like having 10 or 15 tabs open on your laptop all at one time, and the individual switches through the tabs really quickly. Within 5 minutes, they switch through maybe 20 tabs on the laptop and watch a YouTube video for 9 seconds and then go on to Instagram and then go on to their workstation and then move tabs very quickly. So experience in the nervous system will be up here, fight, flight. And it will feel everything goes fast. It's kind of like having 4 cups of coffee in the morning to kind of get us up into mobility and action. And if we're like that the whole day, it's going to be quite taxing on the system. Maybe we'll kind of be here and we'll have maybe 2 more cups of coffee in the afternoon, and everything happens quick. It's the individual on the team that gets 10 tasks done, as opposed to comparing them to the other folks on the team that get 2 tasks done, in the time of that person getting 10 done. So if someone lives in hyperactivity, they're moving quick, their heart rate will be up rather than a lower heart rate, and they're going to be responding or reacting to life very quickly. Some symptoms that can happen here is anxiety, any sort of anxiety disorder. If we look at a more prolonged issue, it could be autoimmune diseases, right? The system internally is fighting itself. This is also someone that will be more just of an anxious, or appear to be more of an anxious human. Whereas on the flip side of this, right, this is hyperactivity. On the flip side of hyperactivity is the deep freeze, which is one part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And someone that experiences life through this lens, will maybe be sleeping in the morning, and then they'll wake up and they really just don't want to get out of bed. I feel numb. I have nothing to get up and look forward to. Things are moving slow. Heart rate is slow. I don't experience much emotion. I feel lethargic all the time, and it's really hard for me to get excited about something. I'm really not going to go up here very much. I may have to do like one of those super cold showers to wake me up. And then I'll be kind of with more energy throughout the day. Then maybe something happens at work and I get just, too much stress going on. So then I jump down back here, and life is just really uninspiring. I move slowly, kind of like a sloth, numb. At an extreme, it's the individual that suffers with depression and doesn't have a lot of relationships. And when they have those days of depression that are quite bad, they'll, go into the room, and the individual will turn off all the lights in the room. And it's really hard to have social connection in this deep freeze state. It's really hard to maintain relationships, healthy relationships. So for some folks that suffer from those black hole days where just can't seem to get themselves up and out the door or see any positive in the world and the light at the end of the tunnel, they'll most likely resonate more with a deep freeze, a shutdown state. What's important to know is that our stress response is most often felt by the people that I work with like driving a car and having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake at the same time. So the sympathetic nervous system is the gas. It gets us going, it revs us up. And the parasympathetic nervous system is designed to come in and kind of damper and slow that revving up down. So what can happen if we have unhealed trauma or just accumulated stress, specifically, a lot of folks have been feeling it over these past 2 years, 2020, 2021, going on into 2022, of just accumulation. And it can feel like we have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, and we're not really going anywhere. But it takes a lot of energy. So now let's move on to that energy that it takes. In the work that I do, thanks to Stephen Porges, the creator of the scientist that developed the polyvagal theory, the cost of doing business means that it's really taxing on the system to live our life with the gas on and the brake on at the same time. And what's important to know is that when we live like that, we start developing illnesses. We start developing mental health issues. We are, basic things in life become actually quite challenging and quite taxing on the system. So looking at the window of tolerance, someone can have a fabulous life living in the faux window of tolerance. Someone can get married, have kids, have promotions, and have a loving connection with the people around them in the fake window of tolerance. The only difference is that it's more taxing, it costs more energy on the system to be living that way. So it's important to note here that there's no shame or not good enough energy that I'm trying to create here about living in the faux window of tolerance. The only difference from the true window of tolerance and the faux window is that it's more taxing on our system if we live in the faux window of tolerance. So when I say more taxing, what happens when our cells actually need to work harder to do basic things? Well, we have symptoms coming up. So now we're going to move on to part 3. We're going to talk about symptoms and defensive accommodations or coping mechanisms. So first of all, let's talk about coping mechanisms. When we live in that gas on, brake on state, we can actually live a few weeks in hyperactivity, go, 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 drink 4 cups of coffee a day, be super productive, and be on a high. And then our system may get burnt out from living in that faux survival state, the faux window of tolerance and survival state. Then we drop down to the deep freeze for maybe 4 days. So let's say we have 4 weeks on of hyperactivity, go, go, go. Then we have 4 days of I can't get out of bed. The individual may experience just like binge watching Netflix for like 3-4 days. And then once they feel a little like they have a little bit more juice in the system, they can kick back up into the hyperactivity. And that's a highly functional way to be living in the faux window of tolerance and survival mode. However, as the individual builds more regulation and widens that window of tolerance, that will happen less. And that's the intention of the work that I do and how I have the approach of healing trauma. It's important to know that when the individual lives in their faux window of tolerance, meaning hyperactivity some weeks and some days or weeks in the deep freeze shutdown, individual can be highly, highly functional and live a wonderful life. Have kids, get married, go to university, get promotions, rinse, repeat, all the way until their 70, 80, 90th birthday. The thing is, when the individual lives in the faux window of tolerance, they're going to need these things called defensive accommodations. A defensive accommodation acts, very important, a defensive accommodation acts as a fake parasympathetic nervous system. So a fake regulator. Defensive accommodations, also known as coping mechanisms, help us feel okay. They help us feel human. They help us save face. And no matter what age, studies show that humans start to show signs of saving face at 2 years old, right? Defensive accommodations are there to help us feel okay and save face, appear normal on the outside, even though on the inside, if the individual's feeling a little bit crazy or numb or just not human, these defensive accommodations really come in and do the job. What is a defensive accommodation? First of all, Dr. Daniel Siegel designed the word defensive accommodation, which basically defends against overwhelm, defends against psychosis and going over the top, basically. Because for a lot of individuals, if the individual does not have this defensive accommodation, they will go into psychosis. It really acts as that damper on the sympathetic nervous system. So coming in, what are some common ones? Well, alcohol is one that is widely accepted. Smoking, vaping, excessive shopping. Right now, most people are doing it online. It can be pain. Some people's defensive accommodation, if chronic pain is their most well-known symptom, when they go past their window of tolerance, what happens? The pain gets worse. The pain in their body gets worse. It can be eating too much or too little. It can be porn. It can be no relationships. It can be codependency, workaholic. These are the ones that I find to be the most common. And if you're still with me, thank you so much for being here. And also start to consider with yourself, what is your go-to defensive accommodation or coping mechanism when things get too much? What do you do to help yourself feel okay? Another good one is basically being addicted to social media is a very common one these days. So what is it that you do to help yourself feel okay and regulate? So defensive accommodations are needed when we are living outside of our true window of tolerance, when we're living outside our true capacity and ability to regulate stress and have a normal, and when I say normal, I mean the body's ability to not work too hard. What is it for you? What do you do to help yourself feel okay? This is part of learning about this, is reflecting on our own tendencies, right? So let's come back around, and now that we've talked about defensive accommodations, let's talk about symptoms. So as we know, the ACE studies show that accumulated stress and unhealed childhood trauma results in a shorter lifespan. So when I say living in the faux window of tolerance is absolutely doable, and a lot of folks, this is where functioning is normal. The life expectancy, though, drops because the cost of doing business just takes more effort to do the same things that one could do if they widen their window of tolerance. So in the faux window of tolerance, along with the defensive accommodations, also comes symptoms. Symptoms like depression with the deep freeze and shutdown, if that's the individual's go-to, depression, no relationships, being cut off from the world for periods of time, extreme isolation. If the individual's on the other side of the window of tolerance, in the faux window, hyperactivity. Hyperactivity is experienced as insomnia, not being able to calm down, to self-soothe, that go, looking for adrenaline hits wherever they can get, starting fights. Teenagers or young people that go out, start fights, start problems with others. Is it possible for you to change your window of tolerance? Change those defensive accommodations and coping mechanisms? Yes, big yes. The whole point of why I make YouTube videos, why I do what I do and teach people about the nervous system and trauma healing is to expand the window of tolerance, expand the individuals, and eventually, as more of us do this work, communities, nations, and the world, we can heal. Let's do a short recap. So at the beginning of this video, we talked about the survival self and the true self. So as an individual works on broadening their window of tolerance, and this is why I do the work that I do, I essentially teach people how to expand their window of tolerance, so then those defensive accommodations and coping mechanisms kind of fall away, and the individual has more space before they reach for the bag of chips or the codependent behavior. They can actually be like, oh wait, I actually used to do that, but I don't need to do that anymore, because they have more regulation on board. When we come back to the survival self and the true self, so many folks tell me, hey, I'm starting to feel more like myself. I'm so grateful. I can just say what I want to say without filtering or deflecting. So that is the survival self can kind of take a back seat and the true self can come forth. And we're always going to have both. And, you know, if we have more stressful events, our survival self might have to come on board and kind of be ruling the ship or driving the car. But eventually, as you do more and more of this work, you'll be able to expand your window of tolerance and have your true self really be the front and center stage of your life. And who doesn't want that? So I hope this video was helpful in understanding what the window of tolerance is and why or how it affects our mental and physical health. If you're looking for more resources, go on over to my website, luanarose.com. I have a lot more free videos over there. You can also book a one-on-one session with me if you like to know what it physically feels like in your body, being, and life to expand your window of tolerance and build your capacity for nervous system regulation. I am here to help, and thank you so much for being here and sticking with me through this video. If you've had some aha moments through this video, comment below and let me know what's something new that you learned that you didn't know before. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.